starvation and hate shakes the body.
They were born in Tel Aviv. They're a former IDF soldier. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Meital. Can you talk about why you've decided to take the stand and talk about what you did as an Israeli soldier and your change of heart?
Yes, thank you, Amy, for having me. So I was raised in a very, I would say, extremely Zionist family, but also very common way of being raised in Israel. I have a lot of war heroes in my family, fallen soldiers, Lehi recruiters, Air Force commanders. And as the child of my father, I was recruited into the Air Force. And after 6 months of serving, my base was moved from Tel Aviv to the south. This was 2002. And I was asked to send planes to fuel planes that were going into Gaza, to bomb Gaza. At that time, I didn't have the language to understand exactly what's happening, but as we returned to the base, I had my first panic attack and couldn't enter the base. And the next day had to come and stand trial, and I was grounded to the base for 3 weeks. And in those 3 weeks, I understand that I have to leave the army. And that, knowing at that moment, made me want to take my life because it was so against everything I was taught. And that started a process that I will be in for the rest of my life, which is the undoing of that indoctrination and that brainwashing and the way that the Israeli identity has been merged with the Zionist identity.
So 2002, and what it means for you now to speak out and how much support you have publicly in Israel and maybe privately, people who are afraid to speak out.
My need to leave the army at the time really came from, like, my body said no. We're also 18-year-olds that the Air Force has better conditions, and it is considered a perk. And leaving the army was, at that time, felt an impossible decision, and also there was no other decision in my body, so I had to follow that. I am trying to be heard as loudly as I can because I do think that the only thing that is really unique about my experience is that I was raised extremely Zionistic. Yeah. I
should be more specific. As a former IDF soldier, you were responsible for assigning planes that the Israeli Air Force sent to refuel the other planes that were bombing Gaza?
My job was to send basically fuel planes. I was on the ground.
So if you can talk about the equation that some critics, pro-Israel advocates make of being anti-Zionist with being anti-Semitic.
I was raised extremely Israeli, which was also meant that I wasn't raised very Jewish. From that merging, you know, the Zionist identity, a part of that propaganda is to really hold it within the cage of anti-Semitism. Like every time that we criticize Israel, someone can say, you're anti-Semitic. But in reality, there's nothing anti-Semitic about criticizing Israel. The merging of Israel with Judaism is something that Israel would like us to hold as a way to protect itself. But in reality, anti-Semitism is a very specific thing that we are not causing it and we will not undo it. And the only thing we can do is to continue to resist it. And at the same time, what Israel is doing right now has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. What Israel is doing right now is a genocide. What Israel has been doing for the past 75 years is apartheid, is occupation.
I wanted to ask you what message you have for young people like Tal Mitnick, who is a refusenik, who's refusing to be an Israeli soldier in the occupied territories.
First of all, for everyone who can, to just find their heart and to liberate themselves from this identity that we call an Israeli identity. And there is no need for any one of us to serve in the IDF. The IDF should not exist. The state of Israel should not exist. We can be free without it. We can have a true connection to our heart without that identity. To the US legislators in California, you know, the fact that we were even able to take a break while there's a genocide happening is an impossible idea to hold. But now you really need to make decisions. And, you know, in the federal level, we are not being heard. So please, I beg of you, make this stop. in whatever way you can.